variable data campaigns. And both of these files that I'll be showing will be available on the reseller portal. And these can be shared with your customers, or you can use these internally as well. So let's take a look at a postcard layout. The first thing you should notice here is that we are working within Adobe InDesign. This campaign is built for the EDU college or university who's marketing to prospective students by inviting them to an open house at the college. Now, all campaigns are based on data. So I'd like you to see the data that we're using for this particular campaign. And it's a very simple Excel spreadsheet. We can use an Excel file, a CSV file, or a text file. And in my example, I'm showing the prospective student's first and last name, their grade point average, the school major that the prospective student's interested in, and the address information. And we're going to use this simple database to create a very robust, targeted variable data print layout. It's also important to note that the data is always supplied by the customer. So now let's begin personalizing our layout. You'll see within InDesign, because of the XMPie software, we now have an additional palette within InDesign that is called the XMPie palette. And the first thing we're going to do is connect to our data source and browse out to the data that we just viewed earlier. And once connected to that database, you will see now that we're seeing the headers of the data, or what we call at XMPie the adore objects, and we can scroll through that data and see the actual data just by selecting the Show Data column and scrolling through the data one record at a time. Now let's look at our postcard layout and make it variable. So if we look at the back side of this postcard, where our address block information is located, let's, within InDesign, select our first name area and double-click on the XMPie palette, and it automatically connects the data source to that field and makes it variable. We'll do it the same with the last name, the address 1 field, the address 2 field, which is typically your city, your floor number or suite number. Let's do the city, the state, and the zip. And now, after tagging all those areas as variable, let's preview some of our records. Now, you'll notice that when there is no address to field or a suite or a floor number, that is being displayed as an empty box. We would want to eliminate that empty space by selecting the XMPie option of dynamic story properties and suppress trailing spaces on empty content. Now, as we scroll through those records, you'll notice that when there is an address to field, it will be displayed correctly. And if there's not, the address field will not be displayed as empty. So now let's look at the front of our postcard, and we will tag some of these areas as variable as well. We'll do the same as earlier by selecting the first name area in our welcome box. We'll tag that as variable. We'll do the same thing in the scholarship banner area. But we want to make sure that any long names will also appear correctly within the text box. Within the XMPie palette, I can select go to the longest first name, and XMPie will scroll through the database and display the longest first name in the database and display it in our text box area. You'll notice that it does not, the text box is not large enough for the longest first name to be displayed. So again, I'll use an XMPie feature called Display Dynamic Story Properties and suppress, this time I will actually select a copy fit option. So I will want my text reduced or enlarged in order to fit in the text box, and now you'll see after making that selection that the longest first name fits, but the shorter names will also be displayed correctly as well. Let's look at a completed postcard and scroll through some of the records so that you can see some of the variability. You'll notice that a discount coupon is also being displayed. Our colors are changing based on specific data in our database. And specifically, let's look at the image here, which looks like a teacher writing on a chalkboard. Notice how the name looks like it's actually written in chalk. This image was created via a template in Photoshop that has a text layer given the proper angle, color, and position to make it look as though it's really integrated into the image. These templates can be created in Photoshop by your customer, or they can be purchased from XMPie, and we'll look at a website shortly of where those templates reside. So let's, again, scroll through the data so that you can see our picture changing on the left, which will correspond to the other personalization in the postcard.